Welcome and good afternoon, everybody, to our first hybrid meeting of the Council on Post-Secondary Education. I'm going to ask for all of your patience with us as we go through this for a first time. Up until now, through the COVID situation, we've been doing strictly remote meetings. But as we move into reopening the schools and the institutions, we've decided to move to this hybrid approach where we have council members and the two college presidents here in the room. Some college council members are on the Zoom as well. For the record, if we indicate, please, that we have all council members present, and specifically council member Monty and Williams are on the Zoom. The rest are in person here in room 4090 at the Community College of Rhode Island, as is President Hughes, President Sanchez, Ms. Owens from our staff, and Mr. Vada from CCRI. Thank you all for all of the work. A lot of work went into putting the meeting to make it work, and I appreciate all of that. We're in accordance with CCRI policy, everybody will maintain their mask while on the property. So please keep your mask on. If you are speaking from in the room and feel like you're not being heard well, I'm told just protocol, the paper masks seem to work better than the cloth for hearing. So I will encourage you to do that. We do have some at the table. I will call the meeting to order as we do have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. And I am going to make one edit to the agenda and ask for a motion at the appropriate time. There is not a need for an executive session this evening. So executive session was placed on the agenda. There are no topics in executive session, so that will be being removed. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting. Motion made by?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Bishop Williams, seconded by Mr. Mello. I now ask for a motion to amend that agenda to remove the executive session. Motion made by?
Izzo.
Motion made by Duffy, seconded by Izzo. All those in favor of the amendment on the agenda? Yep. Doing the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Stands passed. Motion now to accept the amended agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Stands approved. Thank you. Also this evening, we are having an open forum. Notice was put out on the Secretary of State's website along with the other required notifications, inviting the public to register for public comment this evening for the registration period that closed yesterday at 5:30 for logistical purposes. We did have 7 people registered to speak. Of the 7, 4 have yielded their time to our first speaker. Our first speaker will be Scott Bromberg. Scott is the president of the Henry Barnard School Parent-Teacher Association. And Mr. Bromberg, if you could put your camera back on for me. We'll pause for a minute and let you get technology up with us. There he is. There's Mr. Scott Bromberg. Mr. Bromberg, due to the 1, 2, 3, 4 others who have yielded time to you, sir, you have up to 15 minutes, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the Council, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Scott Bromberg, and I am the father of a 2nd grader and 4th grader and the president of the Henry Barnard School Parent Association. Our family has been part of the HBS community for 5 years. I am here representing the young learners and the trusting parents who came to Henry Barnard for a wonderful education at Rhode Island College's 122-year-old laboratory school. As you may know, earlier this summer, we as parents were incredibly frustrated that neither the administration of Rhode Island College nor representatives of the state would provide any information about what was occurring with Henry Barnard School. Our letters, calls, and emails were ignored. We learned the school was possibly closing through rumors in late June. After having to utilize a media story in order to get a meeting with Rhode Island College administration to clarify these rumors, we were told that Henry Barnard School had a $1.5 million deficit annually for the past 3 years, with little detail behind those numbers, and that the school was not diverse enough to be the college's laboratory school. Rhode Island College offered no promise beyond this year and no answers to the questions asked by the parents. Their tone was both condescending and apathetic. How dare we bother the Rhode Island College administration with questions regarding the future of our children's school? All offers to assist the administration were ignored, as they have been historically. The result of this lack of engagement is now parents rushing to figure out the next steps of their kids' education. And if that wasn't hard enough, these decisions are being made during the biggest health crisis in 100 years. We were also told by the Dean of the School of Education at a subsequent meeting that what we have known as a laboratory school was in fact not used as a laboratory school for Rhode Island College in the last year. It was therefore pretty ironic, if not stunning, that the front page of the School of Education's website still to this day showcases a video promoting the college's laboratory school at Henry Barnard as a chief reason to select Rhode Island College as to a place to obtain your college degree in education. In the same ironic spirit, parents were being sold the promise of a diverse education in a laboratory format when HBS recruited us to be part of the school. It is also challenging that over the 122-year history of the school, each new Rhode Island College administration and dean brings a differing opinion and value of Henry Barnard. The Parents Association has reached out to form an alliance with the Rhode Island College administration numerous times over the years without any response. It is important to note that Henry Barnard's closing is not the result of the pandemic, but more of neglect and systemic mismanagement on the part of Rhode Island College. If the budget was a concern, why wasn't tuition corrected? Why were alumni lists not kept for countless students of the 122-year-old institution in order to create an alumni foundation? Why was there no effort to create an endowment for the school? Why was the Providence Plan phased out and yet no attempt was made by Rhode Island College to address the resulting budget shortfall, nor the decline in diversity? Why did more than 100 open seats remain unmarketed and unfilled over the past several years? Why has Rhode Island College not actively recruited new students? No wonder this school has financial issues. Rhode Island College has done a disservice to the students, teachers, faculty, and parents of the Henry Barnard School. But thank goodness for the teachers at Henry Barnard, who are stellar human beings, compassionate and talented individuals. They have held the school together and continue to be passionate, engaged, and excited about helping our children learn, even in the midst of a pandemic and school closing. It is disappointing that Rhode Island College doesn't have the vision or foresight to see what a treasure Henry Barnard School is. HBS could have been a statewide laboratory school that could benefit the entire state and serve as a model of what education should be in Rhode Island. The staff are intuitive to the children's needs, utilize an integrated curriculum that spans subjects and bridges science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and includes community building and beyond. This is a school that doesn't teach to the test. It bends to meet the individual needs of each child. HBS produces successful students who are prepared to take the next steps in their education. But let's talk about some quantifiable data. According to the latest RICAS data, the reading proficiency of third graders across the state is 47%. Last year, Henry Barnard third grade students placed at 81% reading proficiency. The school is producing students nearly doubling the state average in reading proficiency. All this said, we believe it is important to have the feeling of the parent and the alumni bodies reflected for the record, and now hope to put the sad chapter behind us in favor of a more exciting future. We are encouraged to have a group of highly motivated parents who are incredibly interested in continuing the legacy of this school and building a visionary opportunity for children in Rhode Island for the next 120 years. We are grateful for the chairman's work to provide us with information about the school, including detailed budgets and information on the building. We also appreciate the board's willingness to work with the parents who are working hard to create another viable solution for the children of HBS and the rest of the state of Rhode Island. We have a vision for the future of Henry Barnard School that remains true to its roots as a laboratory school. We applaud the dedicated staff of the school who are in the midst of this uncertainty and coupled with the pandemic, they still rise up and care for our children, guiding them with their intuitive curriculum and best practices. We will share more information as we have it, but let me say, we are in a vigorous exploratory phase, examining scenarios, modeling, and building a broad coalition of HBS alumni and education experts. In the midst of an education crisis in our state, we have a school that is graduating successful students at a reasonable cost, a real value proposition for families throughout the state. This is why we are reimagining Henry Barnard School and how it can serve future generations of young learners and educators. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. We hope to have some exciting updates on the future of Henry Barnard School in the coming months. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bromberg. I should also note that I should have prefaced the open session with that each speaker is afforded 3 minutes. And again, folks yielded their time to Mr. Bromberg. And each of the speakers shall address the chair, and none of the council members shall engage. This topic will come up during President Sanchez's report, and the council members will have an opportunity to engage at that time. So again, thank you, Mr. Bromberg. If you could return to camera, video off.
You are certainly welcome. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir. Next is Mr. Eric Christensen. Mr. Christensen is the president of the Rhode Island College AFT, representing the full-time faculty at the college. Mr. Christensen, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair Del Giudice, members of the Post-Secondary Council. As president of the RIC AFT, I wanted to first commend President Sanchez and his whole administration for the successful fall reopening and for the inclusive planning process behind it. A really fantastic job. Second, I wanted to address the president's decision to close Henry Barnard School and the acting commissioner's position that this doesn't require CPE approval. The legal questions and the grievance that we filed last week are going to have to be addressed outside of my time. So I'll simply say for now that we don't believe the president has the authority to unilaterally abolish existing programs with no discussion with faculty according to norms of shared governance and without CPE approval. CPE policies and Rhode Island statutes require either that you delegate this authority to the president or that you vote to approve such a proposal. CPE policies further clarify that any program that would require the council's approval to be established must obtain the council's approval to be eliminated, and that would be certainly the case here. I urge the council members also to consider what it means to deny your own authority. Closing an academic department and a 127-year-old institution that's deeply connected to the history of the state, the development of public education and higher education in America is a consequential action. This lab school put the ideas of Horace Mann and Henry Barnard into practice. It became a model for teacher training and a foundation for American public education. It's still where the School of Ed sends students to see innovative teaching practices. As a part of RIC, but also as a brand, Henry Barnard School is a valuable asset, and we are apparently forfeiting it and getting nothing in return. So who has fully thought this decision through? And what will the long-term impact be on RIC? The college is more than just a budget that needs to be balanced. Elementary education faculty were not consulted about this decision, nor were any other faculty. Our contract with you mandates that the RIC AFT is included in long-term planning for the college. So I would like you to answer that question, since we've had no other discussions about how the closure of Barnard fits in with any sort of plan for RIC's future. In the termination letters that were sent to faculty and staff, the reasons for the closure consisted of continuing financial deficiencies and lack of alignment with the School of Ed. There's been no effort undertaken to better align the programs, whatever that means, but it's clear that the underlying problem really is the continued long-term decline in the state appropriation to the college. A sustained campaign to secure an adequate state appropriation would have been and continues to be the appropriate course of action. The RIC administration, the CPE, and the OPC should fight tooth and nail to keep public higher education truly public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. I will ask Acting Commissioner, when you address the council with your report, I know there's been much dialogue about the authority and where that authority lands on the closure of a program and Henry Barnard as a program. So if you could address that during your comments, please. Thank you. I will. Our next speaker, Vincent Bollinger. Dr. Bollinger is chair of the Rhode Island College Council of Professors and director of film studies in the Department of English at Rhode Island College. Mr. Bollinger, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Thanks to the chair for the opportunity to speak, and my thanks to Lynn Owens in particular for facilitating my participation today. I am speaking about the announced closing of the Henry Barnard School and the recent layoffs of almost all the secretaries in the college's academic departments. Both of these actions were done in violation of the charter of our college council. The charter was ratified by your very body and makes explicit that faculty are supposed to participate in the decision-making processes related to faculty matters. Quote, "The authority of council shall extend to all matters of interest to the faculty that are not governed by collective bargaining agreements." End quote. The charter spells out these matters of interest to include personnel matters of college-wide significance. The charter certainly and definitively gives final authority and approval to our college president, but at the same time clearly states that the president cannot make unilateral decisions without first seeking input or response from the faculty. Quote, "The president and other officers of the administration agree not to alter college policy of concern to the faculty until council and the faculty have been informed in writing of the proposed change and given reasonable time to react." I have been in communication with the past chairs of council, and they have confirmed that HBS, let alone any perceived deficiency or problem in the school, has never been discussed with the faculty at college council across the past 3 college presidencies. All members of college council, including the 2 council representatives from HBS, were shocked at the announced closure. The elimination of an entire academic department and 24 positions is unquestionably a personnel matter of college-wide significance, and faculty were never informed in writing or given a reasonable time to react prior to this announcement, not to mention the stark lack of inclusion in any discussion of any vision for HBS's improvement, realignment, or viability. Similarly, departmental secretaries offer vital and contractually guaranteed support to faculty as well as our students, particularly in this remote environment. Again, there was no discussion, no announcement, nothing to do with college council. Faculty had to learn across the course of a tense, miserable day in which our secretaries had to contact their department chairs, their own supervisors, one by one about layoff notices they had received. Our charter offers a clear guide for shared governance. RIC is currently in the process of seeking routine reaccreditation, and we are tasked to demonstrate shared governance as part of our reaccreditation process. These are not the first violations of the principles of shared governance since our last reaccreditation, but these are by far the most glaring. The faculty of RIC are well aware of the terrible financial situation our college faces, and our president faces as well, made so much worse by the pandemic and our state and national leaders not doing enough to support RIC. While meetings between administration and faculty within the past few days give me reason for some optimism for shared governance in future matters, college council and the faculty overall are greatly troubled by these rank violations of our charter, and I, as chair, submit this complaint and protest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bollinger. I'll also note for the record that the Office of the Commissioner of Postsecondary Education has received written testimony for this evening's meeting, and that either has or will be distributed to all of the council members and made a part of the permanent record. So I thank those folks who took the time to write the office, and that information will be duly reviewed as well. That concludes our open forum. Again, there were a couple of issues. Mr. President, I'm sure I know you're going to address Henry Barnard, and Acting Commissioner Cavallaro, if you would address the authority for such action. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of our August 5th, August 12th, and August 19th meetings. Any discussion on the approval of the minutes? I'll have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mello, seconded by?
Second.
Ms. Green. This will be a roll call vote. Ms. Monty.
Yes.
Bishop Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Mello.
Yes.
Senator Rizzo.
Yes.
Chair Cotto.
Yes.
Mr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Green.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. All in the affirmative. The minutes are approved.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Bishop.
I abstained from the vote as it relates to August 12th minutes as I was not present.
Duly noted. Thank you, Bishop. Reports from the chairs. I'm going to yield my time as we've got a full agenda. I'll just comment, and as was mentioned in the public forum, there's been much discussion about the Henry Barnard School. I look forward to the president's presentation and any discussion that will take place at that time. And also commend both President Hughes and President Sanchez and your respective staffs for a safe and uneventful opening and the delivery of education to our student population through the different modes that we've been using. And by all accounts, I've been hearing, while a couple of bumps along the way for individuals along the way, widely successful. So congratulations to you, and thank you for all of the work of you, the staff, and the faculty at the respective institutions. I'll turn the meeting now over to Chair Cottam, if you feel so inclined for a report from the Board of Education. Chair Cottam.
I'll pass on a full report as we have a meeting next week, but I will just say that Elementary Council met last evening, and we talked about the opening of school this week on the elementary side, which was successful throughout the state. I visited 3 schools in Providence, East Providence, and Johnston for dismissals and morning greets. All 3 were elementary schools, and I can't tell you how excited teachers and students were to return to class, and the amount of work that was done by administrators to prepare these schools. The schools I saw were unbelievably organized and clean. There was conversation at last night's meeting about the virtual learning school in Providence, and the commissioner is going to be working on that this week.
Great. Thank you, Chair Cottam, and I echo the great work. Congratulations to all of the local school districts and the Department of Education for the great work in getting the schools open. Next is a report from our commissioner. I'm going to ask Acting Commissioner Cavallaro if you could address that one issue and anything else you've prepared for your reports.
Thank you. I'll dispense with my regular report.
Bring the microphone closer so that those online can hear you.
I'll dispense with my regular report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And in response to the question of the council's authority regarding changes in departments, divisions, programs, and courses of study at the institutions, for those council members who weren't on the previous board, in 2014, July of 2014, when the council, both councils were established, prior to that, the statute that authorizes the then Board of Education, and prior to that, the Board of Governors for Higher Education, included in subsection 4 certain enumerated powers and authority for the council. And back then, the council had the powers to, regarding the adoption and submittal of a budget, which it remains, the approval of tables of organization, which remains, but more importantly, in regards to this issue, the creation, abolishment, and consolidation of departments, divisions, programs, and courses of study specifically were enumerated and set out and granted to the Board of Education, the previous Board of Education, and the Board of Governors for Higher Education. The present council's regulations regarding changes in academic programs, which is dated from 2006, reflects this statutory authority. We have not yet changed all of those regulations to reflect the changes in the statute. In 2014, when the council was established, the Rhode Island General Assembly took certain powers that were previously vested in the council and gave them to the 3 presidents. So there's a specific statute, additional powers of the president for the university, for CCRI, and for Rhode Island College. For Rhode Island College, that is now 16-33 2.1. And in July of 2014, what the legislature did was they took the powers to create, consolidate departments, divisions, programs, and courses of study, and they gave it to the presidents. Now there is a boundary there. So right now, section 2.1A grants to the president of Rhode Island College, and similarly to the president of the community college and to the president of the university, the powers and duties to create and consolidate departments, divisions, programs, and courses of study within the college with the assistance of the commissioner within the approved role and scope adopted by the council. The council's powers still include the power to approve the role and scope of a program. So since 2014, the line of demarcation as to when the council acts or when the council just receives notification, the first line of demarcation is whether the change of the program is within the approved role and scope of the program. And the council members are aware, at many meetings, we now have a listing since 2014, typically in the commissioner's report, of these type of changes. And that report says to the council that the office has reviewed we'd still review the proposed change. We, one, determine if it's in an approved role of scope. If it isn't within an approved role of scope, then the council has to do a full approval, a vote on that change. So I guess a role and scope example. Rhode Island College seeks to establish a law school as one of its divisions. There's no role and scope that approves that. That would be voted on by the council. But for all these other changes, if they're within the role and scope, it's notification to the council. The president has that authority. My interpretation of this statute, the Henry Barnard School is a program within a department, and terminating that program, the authority for which lies with the president of the college. Now, the statute does say, however, that new or proposed eliminations or departments, divisions, or programs, courses of study that are outside the role and scope do get approved by the council. And this has been the practice of the council since July of 2014. Many council members here have gnashed their teeth that this specific authority was taken away from the council and granted to the presidents. However, in the schematic of it, the presidents are the chief executive officers of their institutions. And as the council knows, and you hear me say all the time, this same statute basically says that the council does not get involved in the day-to-day administration of the institutions, because that is within the authority of the president.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner Cavallaro. Next, we're going to move to the reports from the presidents. Our first report will be from our host president, President Megan Hughes from the Community College of Rhode Island. Madam President, if I could ask you to use the podium so that those who are remote will be able to not only see but hear you. And I do know you have staff online. Feel free if you need anybody who you are going to call upon to ask them to re-engage their video so that they can will be visible to the audience as well.
Great. John, am I on here? Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Welcome to CCRI. I want to welcome you all back. When I think about the last time we were all here together, it was quite a different experience. As you all know, we are predominantly offering our courses remote this fall. I hope you had an opportunity to come in through our ramp. Let me just pause and can you guys hear me? Yeah. Enter through the brand new ramp, which is a remarkable improvement over the old ramp. We're very excited when we fully reopen to be able to welcome back thousands and thousands of students and our faculty and staff. Take a look as you're leaving this evening, if you haven't already, at our Great Hall, which I believe I discussed in one of the August meetings. We've converted to a socially distant, safe space for our students to come to the college to do a variety of things. They can come and sit at one of those individual desks and actually take their class online on their device. They can, of course, use our wireless, and they can use it as a safe study space. So we need to build some momentum to really get those chairs full. But I'm really grateful to what our facilities team and our student services team have done in order to make that happen. I'm realizing I'm reading without my glasses, so we'll see how that goes. I can grab mine if I need them. I'm good, Lynn. Well, I'll do a sprint if I need it. We are in the middle of week 3 of our fall term. The early reports from academic affairs based on early student engagement data are encouraging. Again, we're in the middle of week 3, so at our next meeting, I'll come back with a more robust report, but we are feeling optimistic and very grateful to the faculty and staff who really spent the summer, as I discussed with you throughout the summer, really getting ready to take our capacity to deliver remote instruction to the next level. So we are hopeful we will be seeing strong student learning outcomes. And again, I will come back and report to you on that. The request for this evening's comments were to discuss our budget, including our enrollment, and I will move to that part of the report now. At last month's council meeting, I outlined the financial challenges the college is facing due to a decline in enrollment and uncertainty over the state budget. Both of those remain today true. I shared the cost-saving strategies that the college had already taken. That includes reduction in pay for senior administrative staff, a freeze in filling non-critical vacancies, consolidating our course offerings, reducing our overtime, renegotiating vendor contracts, and other measures. Those measures have helped to mitigate the financial impact, but are not sufficient to meet our significant fiscal challenges. As a result, on August 19th, we announced the college was laying off 122 part-time employees. The decision to let go most of our part-time staff was an extremely difficult one. We know it will have an impact on how our college operates and on a personal level on our colleagues and friends. We continue to monitor enrollment as well as discussions at the state and federal level daily, and we anticipate taking further steps to reduce our costs. So where do we stand with enrollment? We expect to have a total fall enrollment of approximately 13,200 students. That will land us roughly 10% down from last fall's enrollment of 14,775 students. So we project 13,200, and that's down from 14,775. The college, as I outlined with you at our last meeting, is offering a late start 11-week condensed term in an effort to shrink that enrollment gap. We won't close it, and to provide more students with the opportunity to pursue higher education. The late start semester, or last call for fall, as it is being marketed, will allow us to serve students who, for a variety of reasons, were delayed in registering and may have otherwise felt it was too late for them to enroll in college this fall. And that includes our promise students, so last year's high school graduating seniors. We are actively enrolling students in this last call for fall program. We will begin that condensed term begins on Monday, September 28th. As of today, we have more than 850 students enrolled in these late start courses. And what I would want to qualify there is some of those are students who started with us on August 31st and are now adding new courses at the end of September. And then some of those are entirely brand new students. That data needs to be disaggregated at the next meeting. I'm happy to provide you those numbers dissected. Finally, as part of this late start semester, we expect to serve between 30 and 50 Providence Public School District seniors as part of the Accelerate program. That is a full-time dual enrollment partnership between RIDE, Providence Public Schools, CCRI, Rhode Island College, and the College Crusade. Accelerate will allow Providence High School seniors to earn up to 24 credits, so a year's worth of college credit between the fall and spring semesters. Here at CCRI, we have developed a holistic program to provide these seniors a full-time college experience in one of 4 pathways. Those pathways follow our guided pathways model. Again, that's a topic we've been talking to you about. Delivered in a modified cohort model, which is academic language for we're going to keep the cohort of seniors together on Fridays. That was important to Providence. We've been able to make that happen, matched with personalized support and embedded academic support. CCRI's Running Start dual enrollment program has proven to be a success for many high school seniors over the years, and we believe it provides a solid platform for us to launch this initiative, the Accelerate initiative. We're well positioned and prepared to provide a successful and positive learning experience for the PPSD seniors, and we look forward to welcoming them to our college. And again, they will be part of that last call for fall start on the 28th. While our fall enrollment numbers won't be finalized until mid-November, it's always true for community colleges, and it will be even more true because of the last call for fall. Here is what we do know. If the projected 10% decline holds true, that equates to an approximately $4 million decline in tuition revenue from what was originally budgeted. So now to the state appropriations side. As I think we all know, uncertainty remains. As announced last week by the governor, the speaker, and Senate president, we know that the General Assembly will not return to take up the FY21 budget until November. We also know the governor and General Assembly, and I suppose everyone in Rhode Island, is hoping, as we are here at CCRI, that the federal government will pass a second stimulus, one that gives the states greater flexibility to use the funds to cover state budget deficits. For FY21, we continue to project a state cut between $8 to $10 million. That cut is consistent with our share of the state's budget deficit for FY21 and is consistent with the amount the state's budget office has asked us to target for our FY22 reduction. As a result, combined with the $4 million projected reduction in tuition revenue, the college projects a $12 to $14 million shortfall in our FY21 budget, so this year's budget. The first phase of cost reduction actions that I outlined earlier, including the layoff of part-time employees, account for just under $10 million, $9.7 million in annualized savings. That means we still have between $2.5 and $4.5 million in cost-saving measures that must be implemented. It is very likely we will need to take further action to bring our budget into balance, including furloughs and staff reductions beyond the part-time layoffs, in order to meet this serious financial challenge. Each decision the college has made and will make going forward is with the most current financial information available and always with a consideration of causing the least possible harm to our community. Despite the difficulty and the challenges that lie ahead, our commitment to providing our students with an exceptional educational experience and our focus on maintaining a safe learning and working environment remain constant. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Madam President. I know this has been a very stressful time for both the administration, faculty, staff, students, as we go through this process. There hasn't been a break on any side of this, and I recognize that, and I appreciate your sacrifice and that of every category of every person in the community college community. Questions for President Hughes from the council? Mr. Mello.
Not so much a question, just a comment. I said at a previous meeting, and I want to say again very clearly that the extra initiative to do this last call for fall, I think, is brilliant. I know it put even more work on top of your team and yourself in addition to everything else you were doing, but I think it's really smart, and it gives more people a chance, more young people a chance to get back into school and to do that. So I applaud you for that. It's really, I think it's a great initiative, and I can see that it's paying off in just the numbers that you're saying, getting more enrollees, which is great. And to echo what the chairman said, I mean, you're making hard decisions, terrible decisions, and it's no fun for anybody. So it's unfortunate.
Thank you, Mr. Mello. Anybody else for President Hughes? Great. Thank you, Madam President. Next, we'll hear from President Frank Sanchez of Rhode Island College. President Sanchez, you have your glasses. Yes, you do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me see here. All right, just thank you again, and I want to thank the entire council. A little bit of good news at Rhode Island College to start off my report. This year, we received 2 more Department of Education TRIO grants at the college. This will make 3 total over the last 2 years, and in excess of $3.6 million, specifically targeting special programs for first-generation low-income students and students with disabilities. We submitted 2 proposals this past year and received for student support services, the regular program, as well as student support services STEM program to support students in science, technology, engineering, mathematics at the college. Of course, the college doesn't have engineering, but a whole host of science programs supporting, again, first generation and low income students. So kudos to our student success folks. In terms of enrollment, as you'll recall, this past beginning of July, we were projecting about a 12.9% decline in enrollments through the outstanding work of a whole team of individuals, both in admissions, advising, first-year experience, as well as our communications folks with advertising. That number is now at about 6% decline from the previous year. I believe Council Member Williams at our last meeting asked, what would be the very best case scenario going forward? I think at that time, I was crossing my fingers to try to get to 9% and maybe a little bit below 9%. So you can see at 6%, really remarkable work went into outreach, lifting holds, and just encouraging students to stay engaged with the college. I will say that our Be Bold campaign appears there are some, as well as virtual programming, appears to be showing very, very good evidence, early evidence as to its impact. Of course, this was reaching out, this whole campaign ran across several platforms, including broadcast TV, streaming TV, radio, traditional radio, social media. The numbers that I received just this past week were that we had over 2.3 million impressions as a result of this campaign, about 28,000 video completions, and nearly 16,000 what they call clicks and swipes, basically folks engaging in the content. And we think that has led both to, or primarily to reaching the 6% decline that we're seeing instead of the original projection that we had, again, back in July. Also on the enrollment front, we continue to transition to a more automated enrollment management communications, including admissions, orientation, financial aid, and registration and records. And this new platform is going to allow us to utilize real-time and historical data from the point of initial contact to navigating campus systems and processes once our students are enrolled. And the college will be able to monitor the effectiveness of this platform to provide better student-centered and a better technologically better experience for our students. This past spring, we also, under even these conditions, as we planned, opened up our new Prospective Student Center, now open in Roberts Hall. It replaces the former Career Center, which is now located in a higher traffic student area in the library. But the Prospective Student Center has been designed to provide all campus visitors with a personalized, high quality, modern experience and engage with, so that Students and families and parents can engage with recruiters and learn more about the college and programs. And even in the remote environment, we've designed the type of social distancing required of this new environment of COVID-19 and our health and safety standards. In terms of the budget challenges, and some of this again may sound familiar from previous presentations, but there are some new developments that I think are of importance. From 2018 to 2020, the college managed deficits totaling $13.7 million, which we've addressed every year through reductions in operating costs, lowering financial aid and assistance to students, restricting travel, freezing overtime, limiting hiring, and certainly combating that through some of raising tuition. Before COVID-19, we were anticipating about a $4.1 million deficit for 2021. Due to COVID-19, the college now projects the deficit would increase right now at about $10.4 to $12.4 million in light of mitigation costs, decreased enrollments, no increase in state aid over the governor's recommended 2021 budget. In order to bridge that shortfall, the college had to take an unprecedented 15% reduction in our operating expenses. This was not across the board cuts. We were very strategic and tactical in where those cuts needed to happen at the institution. At first, the college managed to avoid the most extreme cuts by taking other measures, certainly including but not limited to a series of austerity measures, which included reductions in discretionary spending, overtime, travel, compensatory time, executive pay cuts, which we've mentioned certainly before, and that started back in July 1st. Salaries for the president, vice presidents, associate vice presidents, and deans were reduced 10%, 7.5%, and 5% respectively. We continued hiring freezes. More than 30 new vacancies have been created since May 2020 through retirements and other attrition. These vacancies will remain unfilled in addition to 28 positions held vacant this prior year. Reduction in adjunct faculty this year. Unfortunately, we're going to be cutting approximately 50% for the upcoming academic year after 3 straight years of declining adjunct faculty employment. Delay of cost of living adjustments, certainly through the negotiations with our faculty unions, have resulted in delay of 2.5% COLAs. However, these cuts were not enough to close the gap. Consequently, the college has taken more aggressive action to reduce overall operating expenses, including the permanent layoff of 35 Council 94 employees and the closure of Henry Barnard School at the conclusion of the 2021 school year. And even though the college has taken these difficult steps, there's still quite a bit of uncertainty ahead of us. The college has not been informed of its final budget for the current fiscal year, and the General Assembly will not convene until after the November election. Furthermore, the college has been instructed to prepare a 2022 budget that reflects a 15% reduction in our state appropriation on top of the FY 2021 reduction, which makes additional cuts almost a certainty. Happy to answer any questions before I go into the Henry Barnard presentation.
Any non-Henry Barnard related questions for President Sanchez on his presentation? No? President Sanchez, oh, I'm sorry, Senator Rizzo. Use the mic, please, so that the folks remote can hear you.
President Sanchez, in terms of some of the initiatives that were taken to address at the outset when you talk about the budget, when it was totaling 13.7, you went through a number of things, and you mentioned lowering financial aid and limited hiring, and particularly raising tuition. Is there any sense on the part of the college how the lowering of financial aid and the raising of tuition may have impacted enrollment?
Yeah, we're very concerned about that. Our initial investment, even this year, we set aside about $750,000. We simply did not have those resources. We only could allocate about $250,000. We do have a concern. Obviously, when we do raise tuition, that impacts particularly our lower income students in terms of broad miscellaneous expenses. We're going to be looking at what that potential impact is. This year, as you might imagine, is an odd year. There's no baseline data during a pandemic. And so we can guess what the financial impact might be. What's interesting is nationally, there's more data. The Washington Post had an article today. I've been talking to colleagues nationally. They're beginning to see a trend how the retention and persistence of students is getting hit very hard. Many students, and often lower income students, are leaving college now. I have a colleague out in New Mexico who are about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of us, and they are getting crushed with students leaving because of the experience, increased sense of depression, loneliness, and just not the collegiate experience they want. And so that persistence is being impacted, and oftentimes financial aid, if they don't have an adequate support, they may choose to not continue. But those are absolutely concerns we have at the college.
Mr. Mello.
I just wanted to make sure that I followed along. I understood that you said that the enrollment was better than what we thought, which is great. Still projecting a $10 to $12 million deficit. You went through a list of things that you've instituted to reduce that gap. What remains of a gap that needs to be cut going forward, if any, or have you met what you think the deficit is now?
So we don't think we've met the gap yet for a couple of reasons. There's still a lot of uncertainty right now. Enrollment in terms of the retention of students we're concerned about. We, like CCRI, we will not have a final enrollment count a little bit earlier, probably by mid-October. And that's where we see total number of students that are involved. We believe it'll continue to go down in terms of total number of students at the college. So that certainly affects our overall deficit. Right now, and I'll speak to HBS in a little bit, but that deficit continues to increase. It's well over $2 million now. We had projected at the beginning of the year about 1.6, but that number continued to climb very, very quickly. We had projected about 170 students enrolled. It's at 105 right now. And so we will eat that deficit this year at the college. So I don't believe the deficit is covered yet as the environment continues to shift and change.
Can you be more specific then as to what the percentages it is covered? I want to get an order of magnitude of understanding. You've made the cuts and you've eliminated half the deficit without getting into specific detailed numbers, but in your mind, you must have a sense that, oh, I've got half of it covered, 3/4 of it covered. We've got this small gap to close, or I've made all these cuts and the deficit keeps growing and I've made no progress. I'm not clear on where we are in your mind.
No, absolutely. Our 15% reduction and some of the decisions that we've made to date, we're getting there. There still is a little gap. It's not a huge gap yet.
Fair enough.
But it's difficult. It can still fluctuate quite a bit. And that's our concern.
Understood. Thank you.
President Sanchez, knowing that your census numbers won't be in until mid-October, do you have a more specific number, roughly what the population is right now, or is that too fluid and not fair to ask you at this point?
No, I think that's fair. As of yesterday, there were 6% decline in enrollments in terms of specifically undergrad and grad. Undergrad was down 6.5%. So we have about 6,029 students. Graduate enrollment was down 2.5%.
I'm sorry, so that's 6,000, what's that?
That's 6,029.
So that's your undergrad population, 6,029?
Undergrad population, and that's 6.5% down.
Got it.
Grad enrollment is down about 2.5%, and that's a little over 1,066 graduate students.
And again, I know those numbers will likely change, and you'll have a firm number in October. So. Yep. Thank you. Senator Izzo, did you have a comeback?
Yes, It's a question of sort with regard to the budget, but it's sort of answer to the budget. And I'm asking in terms of both the CCRI and Rick. I know that when we talk about the budget, we're talking about the monies coming from state appropriations, from grants, from tuition fees, that type of thing. I'd be curious, and not to answer this evening, but going forward, if we can have some idea of what the impact of all of what's been happening over the past several months has been on your development efforts in terms, I know the college is, at least as an alum, you're doing very aggressive outreach via emails and that type of thing. And to be perfectly honest, I have found them very compelling. And it would be, I would be curious as to what that piece has been like, especially with regards to the diminishing financial aid for young people. Maybe if in the future, at a future meeting, we could have some notion of what's happening there. I think it's
Absolutely. We've made, I think, very strong progress on that front of advancement. Traditional, non-traditional resources. Our alumni have been amazing, and particularly during the pandemic, and supporting emergency funds for our students. But I agree. I think that would make for a good topic at another day.
we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, President Sanchez. If we could now move to your Henry Barnard specific presentation, please.
All right. I think we'll do a virtual clicker, maybe.
I do believe we have slides. We're going to present the slides. I believe that the folks on the Zoom webinar should now see the slides. Could Member Monty and/or Williams please confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes,
Member-
we can see them.
Yes, sir. We're good.
Very good, thank you. So the slides are visible on the webinar. President Sanchez, if you could proceed.
Wonderful. Can we go ahead and go to the full screen? I think it's just, I think the upper left-hand corner can take you to the full screen. Yep. Up, just up higher, a little higher. That full screen at the very top, over to there.
There we go. Thank you. Good directions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been, I think, probably my most difficult decision we've made at the college for a whole variety of reasons, some of which you've already heard this evening. But during this time that we're carefully combing through the budget at the college and trying to focus the best that we can on mission critical functions, activities to support our 7,100 students. This process has been particularly difficult. What I thought I would do this evening is kind of lay out the logic and rationale and the effort that's gone in to making this decision really over the last 4 years. It ultimately ended in this decision, but conversations and discussions about Henry Barnard happened the very first year I was at the college. And so if we could go to the first slide, and this gives you kind of an overview of the main factors that were involved in ultimately the decision to close Henry Barnard. It's my view, and I think everyone would agree, that all of our time, energy, resources at the college, faculty, research, administration, staff, all of our time and energy is focused to support our 7,100 college students and the mission of Rhode Island College. And again, this is where we are having very focused conversation. What is mission critical? What allows us to deliver the high quality, high value education that Rhode Island College has always been known for? The second bullet there is that the School of Education, the Feinstein School of Education, the primary role of the school is to develop exceptional teachers, and with administrators and counselors, but we're talking about teacher preparation primarily. And it's teachers across the state. It's teachers to be effective in rural communities, in suburban communities, and in urban communities, to be highly competitive for any teaching job in the state. That is the primary role of the Feinstein School of Education and Human Development. HBS, as it was alluded to a little bit earlier, founded 122 years ago. Its primary role then was to support the education of the Feinstein School of Education and Development students. That was its role. And certainly, from 1920, 1960, when 100% of our students were in teacher education as part of Rice back then, that lab school played a very important role for the college. But as the Feinstein School of Education and Human Development and the competencies of teachers have evolved, the private lab school model of HBS no longer provides the training experience required for tomorrow's teachers. And I'll talk about the programmatic misalignment over many years that evolved to where we're at today, and how there is a clear misalignment with the needs of training tomorrow's teachers. In addition to that, HBS requires now an untenable, really, subsidy to maintain its operations. And I'll go in depth at the financial cost of this program, and that it's clear to me it can no longer be maintained. Subsequently, the college cannot justify or support this subsidy along with the misalignment to maintain HBS. So, as I said, this decision was not taken lightly, and it was not a quick decision. Let me lay out for you, essentially, since when I arrived, the work that we've done to address the issues. And this addresses many of the concerns that the speaker had, the president of the HBS Parent Association had shared. I think this clarifies what actually happened, and no blame here. Not all the parents have been there over the last 4 to 5 years, or even the work that was done before I started at the college. When I arrived at the college, I was informed that the college would have to cover the previous 2 years of deficit of HBS to the tune of $2.6 million when I arrived at my first year at the college. As you can imagine, that got my attention because that's not a good sign of a well-functioning school. The year 2016 that I arrived, it had an additional $1.3 million deficit. And so again, getting my attention, I said, we've got to look at this, because I'd heard of some of the history and working with parents, concerns about raising tuition, and the different issues over time prior to my administration that have been brought up about HBS by both of my previous predecessors. And so I said, well, let's have someone look at this, and I need guidance in terms of how we go forward, because we can't continue to have this type of deficit. And so we had a consultant come in, and they advised that we hire a director of advancement for HBS. That is exactly what I did. In 2017, we hired a director of institutional advancement specifically to address the enrollment concerns and to begin to work on fundraising and the endowment. With the legacy of this institution, it is really unfortunate. They had never built a system, an infrastructure for managing the alumni from this amazing institution. Unlike many private schools just about everywhere, there just wasn't a database, and there wasn't a tracking mechanism when I arrived at the college. And so we hired this individual and invested, made dramatic increases in the advertising, the outreach, the efforts to recruit, significant increases in the investment. And still, we saw from 2017 to 2019 an 11.6% decrease. And there's a lot of variables that go into this when you look at the technology and the infrastructure of the building compared to other private schools. It simply is tough to compete. Rick, in 2019, then sought public funding, knowing that, again, we need to have a sustainable model somehow, some form, and preserve the best we can HBS. So we sought public funding for HBS, and it was not supported in 2019. And then in 2020, this year, and I'll go into a little bit more depth here, but we worked with RIDE, the League of Charter Schools, and a potential charter partner to pursue stability for HBS, but there was no feasible solution. If you go to the next slide, a little bit more in depth of 2020, again, to try to respond to some of the current concerns. In January, our provost, along with the dean, our CFO, and our chief of staff, met with faculty and staff in January at the school and laid out the serious concerns we had about this institution. And we, it was very clear. We weren't mixing words. We were very clear about the serious concerns about the stability of the school. From that discussion, a working group of faculty and administrators was formed to address these issues. And from that group of faculty and administrators, they recommended pursuing a charter option. My administration worked this summer exploring those options, and unfortunately, no feasible solution emerged. In fact, we were working towards that end up into June. At the same time, we were getting news from the state of an $800 million deficit, an additional 15% cut in our budget, and it became very apparent very quickly how serious the financial situation was getting at the college, keeping in mind that we had already cut $13.7 million over the last couple of years, going into this year with additional $4 million, and then projecting about $10 million there. The speed in which the environment changed really forced our hand on this. Let me talk a little bit about the alignment or misalignment of the school, because I think there may be a little bit of confusion here. At least as I've read different articles in the public, I'm not sure the whole picture is out there. You may recall when I arrived in 2016, probably 3 months into my administration, the Department of Education did a review of our School of Education. And it was a significant review because it revealed very big issues, challenges in the curriculum, program design, and clinical experience. And some of you may recall there were circles of individuals out there questioning whether or not the School of Education should have been closed. It was a very serious issue at the college. But we addressed it. We moved the dean along. We hired 2 co-deans, and we began the work. But 3 programs were closed, and we were required to bring on a change mentor, working closely with RIDE, the chair at the time of this body, the chair of the School of Education, the Board of Education, joined us in those conversations, as well as a representative from the governor's office over the course of a year and a half as we transformed, reimagined the entire curriculum of the school. In 2017, after extensive feedback from teachers, principals, superintendents, families across the state, focus groups that detailed and asked this core question: what do the most effective teachers, what are the skills and competencies and proficiencies that they need to be successful? RIDE guided us on several fronts. They said our students and the students of tomorrow in Rhode Island need for longer clinical experiences in school settings with ELL students and SPED. We've now incorporated both ELL and SPED, special education training. It's now embedded into our curriculum and throughout our curriculum at Rhode Island College. They also said we needed, our students and candidates needed greater exposure, interactions, and family engagement in diverse communities identified as an area of needed improvement for teacher candidates. And so those were key recommendations that we had to respond to as part of that review to have an updated School of Education serving the state of Rhode Island. And as you know, the largest producer of teacher certificates in the state. It's clearly a requirement we had to respond to. In regards to HBS, again, formerly a lab school that I think functioned well. Over time, it simply and now no longer provides that type of critical training experiences for our students today. Right now, or as of this past year, very few students with IEP, I think it was about 11%, none of the students with severe or intellectual disabilities, and no students with limited English proficiency. The lab school no longer functions as a place of primary placement. Students are going all over the state for placement to get those exposure, to get that exposure and that clinical training so that they're well prepared to be teachers. In fact, HBS is more of a backup for students if they can't find a placement. We can go to the next slide. And so this leads us really to why I guess the buck kind of stopped with me while I could not justify the continued subsidies I've referred to of Henry Barnard. From 2015 to 2020, Rick has covered a total of $9.8 million to keep Henry Barnard afloat. Almost $10 million has been spent because it's been so out of balance to cover the balance that has come out of the college general fund. In FY20, the actual cost per student for Henry Barnard was approximately $20,000. The average tuition is $12,264, which clearly does not cover the overall operating cost. As we did assessment the first year I was there, I was informed that there were efforts to raise tuition and it was not supported by parents. And some of you may recall, it became very political and the administration backed off and did not move forward with increased tuition. In essence, Rick students who are predominantly blue collar working class families, 50% come from the lowest income brackets, according to the federal government, as they are Pell eligible. Students and taxpayers have underwrote approximately $8,000 to each HBS student for their private education. The college had to make a difficult decision to close the school, and subsequently the school will be closed for the 2021 academic year. I want to move on to process because this is an important part of this decision because it impacts a lot of folks. It certainly impacts 26 employees, and we're working very closely with our Human Resources Office. We will be providing an assortment of employee assistance services as well as our Career Development Center. We're going to do everything we can to support the impacted employees with this transition. Other impacts, as I mentioned before, overall, there was a $9.8 million. By making this decision, because we won't realize any savings this year, it will be next year, we're anticipating an annual savings of about $1.6 million that will likely go towards our deficit and other investments, but $1.6 million every year going forward will be used by the college. The building and its grounds will remain continue to be part of the college overall physical plan. And we will need to do a feasibility study to determine the long-term use. There are many needs at the college. As you recall, this body will recall within the last year and a half, I proposed the need for a centralized set of student services, one-stop shop. As our student services, there's a little bit of maybe quite a bit of a Rick runaround. There's a need to centralize services. This building is central to the quad, potentially could be such of a student services building, but we need to do that feasibility study. One of the most important, if we go to the next slide, aspects of this transition is, of course, how do we support the students, the parents and the families in this transition? You can't help to think of the preschool to fifth graders having to change their school, leave their friends, and go to a completely different environment. It can be pretty scary, I think, for them. And clearly, it's going to be very difficult for the parents and families. We're going to put together an assortment of services and supports for the students and the families. We're going to plan two school fairs, one fair for K-4 and another for grade 5 to look at other options, working with the school psychologist and reaching out to the local schools in the area as options. We're going to reach out to schools to determine how they can support school visits by families and students of HBS. We're going to provide one-on-one counseling sessions regarding school choices with our school psychologist and principal by request. This is a kind of a neat initiative. We're going to work with former HBS alums who are now in 6th through 12th grades, and they have a platform, and they call it the Flip Grid Board, where we're going to invite them to kind of host and support students from HBS now who may be going to their schools, again, as a way to maintain a sense of community and a sense of connectedness for these students in this transition. We're going to share a contact list of families currently at other area schools who are willing to answer questions for current HBS families. If they've selected 1 or 2 schools, they can talk to parents from those schools to hear from the parent perspective about how the school operates. And then school psychologists will coordinate transcript requests and recommendations for students applying to other schools. And then certainly at the end of the year, we'll facilitate those transitions and again, support the students and the staff and their families going forward. Again, this has been a very, very difficult decision for us. You know, I do want to respond to one of the concerns that have been brought up by our faculty. This, in many ways, this was an anomaly. Our RIC Council typically, well, I was talking to Vince during the summer months, the anomaly is that we rarely, if ever, have had to cut within the academic areas. And while the charter, I agree 100%, and faculty should be engaged, our charter, or I should say the RIC Council charter, does not provide guidance in the process in which they're engaged as you talk about layoffs or closing down academic departments. There is no process for that. And so we've engaged, I've engaged personally, and have started a conversation along with our provost, with both Vince and Eric, to say, I need guidance because there are more difficult decisions that will impact the academic side of the house that we need to have processed. Because I believe wholeheartedly faculty need to be involved, but how and to what degree, and how do we do that alongside the collective bargaining requirements of communication and process that are spelled out. And so they're working with the administration. I'm confident we're going to get to the other side of this, but I do see HBS as very much an anomaly because of the timing, the speed in which the environment changed, and that we had to make decisions for families a year in advance because of the year time frame we had to allow faculty and the declining budget that we had to make a very unfortunately a decision that didn't allow for all of those processes to unfold to everyone's satisfaction. Happy to answer any questions folks might have.
Thank you, President Sanchez. I'll state that there's a very thorough presentation. I know from our conversations how much this has weighed on you and on your staff, and that I can attest to the difficultness of reaching this decision, both in you personally and professionally, as it has been a very stressful time for the families and the faculty at HBS. I know emotions have run high on a couple of occasions with some of the exchanges, and I look forward to continued dialogue and support with the Parent-Teacher Association as they go on their exploration to look for options about the future of their children's education. Questions for President Sanchez? Mr. Duffy.
More in the form of a comment, Chairman.
If you please use your mic.
Well, I did find the comments from the faculty and the parents to be disturbing, and they need to be taken very seriously. And I think we all agree that closing a 120-year institution with such a successful history is done only as a last resort. But I am glad to hear the indication in those comments that alternatives are being pursued for it to survive in some form. several of the comments also that were made at the time of the public statements, I found to be also somewhat troubling. In particular, in the press release, there was a statement that laboratory schools are no longer considered best practice. And I see it again in the report today. But when you look at a lot of the leading national colleges and universities in the education field, such as Columbia, UCLA, University of Chicago, Smith, they prominently make their laboratory school a core part of their teacher education program. So I just think that's a false premise. I know there are other issues at stake here, but we should not ignore the fundamental role that a laboratory school plays in an education college. It allows, among other things, experimentation and research and innovation to develop the best practices for education as it moves forward. And I understand there's a focus now more on urban schools. Fine. These are not mutually exclusive ways to educate teachers. You can have a laboratory school, but you can also place them out in urban schools if they choose to go there. And historically, that's always been the case. These are not mutually exclusive approaches. So in any ways, I just am glad to hear from the comments that some kind of alternatives are being pursued, and I just hope they're successful.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Other comments from the council for President Sanchez as it relates to the Henry Barnard School?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Mello.
I guess if I understood what the acting commissioner said, we can say what we want, but he's made a decision. So that being said, we sit here for a reason, and I think that we should be able to say what we want to say. And so I'm going to say what I want to say, even though he's made a decision. And I am not an educator. I'm not an expert on these things. But it seems to me, just sitting here listening to it, that there are two challenges here. One is financial, and the other one is whether or not that school is actually a laboratory that is able to train teachers the way they need to be trained today. I'm oversimplifying, I'm sure, but that seems to me to be what it is. And so what I would rather be hearing, and I think I heard some of the parents saying, is, so then what's the solution to bridge the gap and make it something that can be worked on? And so I guess they're going to do that, the parents. But I think that I think that the college should play some role in helping to facilitate that to the extent that they can. And so what that means, I don't know. But it shouldn't be, I think, that we just throw our hands up and say, look, it's closed, it's going in a year. We told you you've got a year, sort it out. Let us know how it goes. I think we should be more actively engaged in that. And to the extent that makes sense, those are my comments. And I just also think that now, and I saw through the presentation, there were a lot of efforts over the years, things were trying to be modified and changed. It seems as though, for a host of reasons, the parents are maybe more engaged now, maybe because it's real, maybe because there's a lot of anxiety in the world right now, and maybe with an energized parent base that wasn't as energized before, something different can happen there rather than just seeing it closed. So I don't know the answers to it, but it seems to me that we should be trying to be finding a solution rather than just saying it's done.
Thank you, Mr. Mello. I will speak for the president, but you can certainly speak for yourself that the college and the administration have committed to providing whatever requests, data calls, questions to the parent-teacher association as they see necessary. And will certainly provide those requests fully and timely as they go through their exploratory mission. President Sanchez, anything you want to add to that?
I was going to make that comment. Very early on, as this process was unfolding, the president of the Parent Association asked in written form for a point person, which we provided, and we will provide them any data information. They've already asked for the budget, which we've shared, as well as blueprints of the building, and we're more than happy to provide any information they request.
And I've had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Bromberg and have committed on behalf of the council any information that he needs from the council, or if there's a gap in conversation or knowledge, so please raise it to our attention so we can help facilitate that information as well. So we will participate to the extent that the Parent Teacher Association would like us to be engaged.
Great. I'm glad to hear that you're going to be involved in it too, and a conduit for the parents to work through, in addition to the point person from the college. So thank you for doing that. I know it's
Thank you.
more work for you, but thank you for doing it.
Miss Monty on Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. First off, I'd like to just commend President Sanchez as well. I know this was not a decision you and your team made lightly. You have to take into account the fact that these are cherished schools. These schools where we send our youngest children, especially with a small community, are hard to think about them not being there, especially after this length of time. But I think the financial data is clear, and this will not be the first or the last school, unfortunately, in Rhode Island or beyond New England, similar school that will have to be closed in this environment. The reasons why Henry Barnard School got there, I was concerned about, and I think you answered well the two biggest concerns that I had. One was, were there attempts to raise tuition? Was the community there advised that there's a financial problem? And it seems like that was discussed over the last 3 or 4 years, how much parents and families really understood the delta. Still remains to be seen, but you can't compare Henry Barnard School to some of the other small independent or parochial schools and think that tuition was similar to those where people were getting a similar education. And then the other part was just around the diversity or lack thereof. And it certainly seems like you and your team put a full effort into trying to improve that. All said, President Sanchez, I do, I want to personally let you and the council know I do support the parents' opportunity to pursue other options. It would be a shame to have Henry Barnard's name not be continued as an institution across the state. And I personally would offer to help Chair Del Giudice in any way that I can to help those families find another institution where their children can thrive. So thank you for your work, President Sanchez. I support the decision.
Thank you, Ms. Monty. I'll call on Bishop Williams on Zoom now, please.
Good evening. And this is really, really heartbreaking to navigate between the financial matters and where we are today, as well as trying to provide an education, for the little ones. Just to be clear, Dr. Sanchez, is this a fait complete as far as you're concerned? That it is going to happen, that this school is going to close as far as its connection to Rhode Island College at the end of the school year? Is that what I'm understanding? Or is there options that you may not be aware of that may be coming forward that could rectify the situation?
No, you're hearing it correctly. At this point, we believe over the last several years and more recently have explored all the potential options to preserve Henry Barnard. That is not to say that the parent association may find an alternative outside of that, of the purview of the college.
Are you opposed to finances notwithstanding, but are you opposed to having the school readjust and come in alignment with the vision and being a very productive element as far as the laboratory school is concerned with Rhode Island College? Or is that ship sailed?
So in our review and looking at where the program's at and the financial status of Henry Barnard, we don't see that as a viable option at this point to continue to have and now work towards changing the school. I think it'd be very difficult to open that door at this point.
Okay, I think it's very important that not only that I understand that, but even those who may be trying to work behind the scenes in order to, or feel that they can come back 90 days from now and say, hey, we resolved the financial situation, and here's our new plan to fold into Rhode Island College. I think that's an important understanding in going forward. I was actually relieved to hear that there had been communication between your administration and the school prior to this coming up, in this particular season. I was very concerned that there hadn't been communication as indicated for the last 3 presidents, and then somehow we just dropped the hammer and said, bye. I think that just wouldn't have been right. So, but again, I do recognize the pressure and the difficulty in coming to this decision. And, my heart goes out to the parents and the kids and teachers and faculty of the Henry Barnard School, as well as Rhode Island College as it's moving forward.
Thank you, Bishop Williams. Member Green.
Just briefly, I also just understand it's one of those things where you can see everyone's perspective. It's just a difficult decision that's made, it's made in an even more difficult environment. But, and I understand, and I also appreciated hearing more of the communications that you'd had with faculty and the working groups that you had formed. And then I understand that since the announcement has been made that the faculty has become even more vocal about not being involved, have they offered any other viable alternatives that you could, has there been any suggestion of things that you might have considered or something that would still take into consideration that big financial gap and address that?
I have not received from either the chair or the AFT faculty president any alternative ways of covering it. In fact, what we tried to do very early on, I shared with the RIC Council executive team back in May, as we saw the storm of COVID-19 and we saw the budget challenges. I shared my concern at the speed in which decisions were going to have to be made over the summer. I shared with them my concern because there was so much happening and things were going to have to happen quickly. What we put in place in April, early April, maybe even the end of March, was a strategic budget planning resource planning committee, made up predominantly of faculty to give guidance. Their charge was to address the structural deficit of the college. We brought in the best minds around the college and the School of Business, folks who worked in government, to say, hey, we have a structural deficit of the college. Faculty, we need your guidance and perspective on this. And they have provided some recommendations to address the structural deficit. They did have a conversation about HB. And they clearly said this needs to be looked at among many other things. But we're going to continue to work with that faculty group going forward. And it's probably going to be a permanent committee, likely with the RIC Council, so that we can have that transparency, that faculty input on making, I think, again, some very difficult decisions in the foreseeable future.
And then only other follow-up is that I think we have some great resources and alternatives for the families. And I just would hope that would be implemented as quickly as possible. I mean, I know some private institutions have deadlines that you have to meet in order to, apply and be accepted. I'm sure that those have been relaxed a little bit too, but I think as quickly as those resources can be implemented.
Yeah, the school principal and other faculty members, they're quickly compiling a resource. I'd love to get a guide of sorts, but to your point, I think the families need it now. And even if it's loosely put together, as long as they have the resources, that would help.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Senator Izzo.
Yeah, President Sanchez, I want to take the opportunity to compliment you and your administration in terms of grappling with a number of significant issues since your arrival. This clearly was a very difficult decision. I think that's obvious in terms of the response from faculty, from parents, from the folks on the council policymakers. But I think that the presentation you made tonight is reflective of a sensitivity to those matters. But that in the end, when we hired you, we charged you with making sound, good decisions to ensure the mission of the college goes forward. I think that we have to sort of keep in mind, since your arrival, just before your arrival or concurrent with it, the college went through a major audit. And you had to respond and do a number of corrective actions, many of which were extremely difficult. And I think that the college, as with colleges throughout the country, are experiencing hard financial times. But I don't think it's a result of your not having, and your staff not having paid attention and worked on remediating those issues that required it. The fact that the college has been able to continue its, I think, kind of a progressive approach to teacher education. You also were confronted with a very, and I'll use the word blistering, evaluation of the program at the college. And I think that you all have handled that well. You went out, you brought in people that were not just transactional in terms of solving the problem, but had a vision and attempted to bring that teacher training program in alignment with the needs in the broader community. Education has changed so dramatically and continues to change so rapidly, it's difficult to keep up with. I'm probably the only person here that was involved with Henry Barnard. 60 years ago, as a freshman at Rhode Island College, I went there for practicum. And I actually had someone named Mr. Duffy, who required that you wear a tie if you showed up in a classroom at the Henry Barnard School.
Good rule.
And, but in any event, and I've had nieces who have attended, I've had good friends whose children have attended. I remember when the Henry Barnard School, you registered your child at birth to try to ensure a spot. So it does evoke a lot of emotion in terms of doing this. I think you have made a decision. I'm hopeful, and I think that even though we don't vote on it, that we communicate that we support your efforts. We support the efforts of the parents, and I'm really pleased that the chair has reached out, and it appears that the professional staff is reaching out to work with parents in solving these matters. You know, education is a tough business. And I've always said, even in terms of elective office, school committees are probably the most difficult because it's so personal. People really are invested in their children. And that's one position I would never want. But in any event, I just want to thank you and wish you well as you continue with this effort.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Izzo. Any other comment on the topic? Thank you, President Sanchez.
Thank you.
We're going to move now to item number 7A and 7B on our agenda. In the discussion section, a notification of a proposal from College Unbound for conditional approval to operate in Rhode Island and offer a Bachelor of Arts degree in organizational leadership. And item B, which would allow for more than 50% of that to be online. I'm going to ask that Dr. Tammy Warner and our two visitors from College Unbound, Mr. Lickey and Adam Bush, to join us. I'd also thank Adam for his technical support before the meeting started. And Tammy, I'm going to turn it over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This proposal is submitted for discussion pursuant to the Council's regulations governing institutions of higher education operating in Rhode Island. I would remind the Council that an institution seeking approval to operate as a higher education entity in the state of Rhode Island may be granted initial approval, conditional approval, or full approval. College Unbound was reviewed and granted initial approval in 2015. According to the regulations, the initial approval period may only last 5 years, after which the institution may seek full approval so long as the entity has received accreditation from its regional higher education accrediting body. College Unbound is currently completing its NECHI accreditation process. As such, the council may review and grant conditional approval for a period of 1 year while the accreditation review is completed. College Unbound will be subject to a complete review upon accreditation decision and/or application for full approval to this body. I now invite College Unbound President Dennis Lickey to provide the council with a brief update on the status of their current accreditation review and subsequently on the college's shift to full distance learning in response to the coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you very much. I got my shirt on, so you know where I'm from. And I see Bishop Jeff Williams and the Honorable Tom Izzo, who were here in 2015, making that decision. So as Tammy said, we got accepted, approved in 2015. That allowed us to go to the regional accreditation, which was called NEAS, now it's called NECHI. In 2017, we received the eligibility for the regional accreditation. In 2018, we received the approval for candidacy, which is the big step. We've been through many visits and many reports. And once you're in candidacy, that allows you to apply to the federal government to have your students be eligible for Pell. We did that. We got accepted March 2019. And between March 2019 and the end of August, that was our real start where we could, our students could get financial aid. We got 100 students that started in the fall. So NECHI looks at this process as 5 to 7 to 10 years. They have approved us to speed up the process, and we were supposed to have our last meeting in March, but something happened. So then everybody was so optimistic that it wasn't anything big. So they set up a time to visit in June. That didn't happen. So next week, September 27th, a week from now, a week and a half from now, we are doing one of the first virtual visits to get accreditation. It's 2 years ahead of time. They told us to not be too hopeful, but they felt good enough to move us quickly ahead. So in order to move forward with NECHI, we need the Rhode Island approval. And then we will return in a year, hopefully with our full accreditation regionally, or they may say another year. So I thank you. We've been very successful. We've had just 2 major graduating classes, and we've graduated 84% of our adults, of our low-income adults. So it's been exciting, and I'll take any questions, and Adam can talk about the distance learning that they've asked all colleges to do. So I'm open to questions.
Great. Mr. Lickey, if you could, 84% is fantastic. Could you just give me an actual number that goes with that? Is 84%, is that 7 people or 7?
Yeah. No, Adam, I don't know if you know the exact number. The last 2, we've graduated like 120 people. Some of our work was with other colleges. Right. This is the data with the last 2 classes that the number's small, but it's still 30 students that have graduated, 15 1 month ago, and about 20, I think it's 35 a year ago. But our data has been pretty much like that ever since we started. So we're very proud of our ability to create a very personal place and get those kind of results. So.
Right. Dennis told the long history of how we've been working with schools since 2009 and have graduated that 120, helped to facilitate the graduation of those students at other institutions. We've had 30 graduates from College Unbound over 3 years of graduation ceremonies. Of our first cohort of 16 students that started in spring of 2016, 14 of those students have since graduated. And so our 4-year graduation rate is as wonderful, as kind of Dennis is bragging about. Last week, we had our last graduation ceremony that we did as 20-minute individualized ceremonies where a student could come and bring up the 4 family members. And so we had an 8-hour marathon day where people came and through and had their special ceremonies. We went. But I guess just a few quick alumni pieces. 75% of our alumni, of the 30 alumni, report they were unlikely to have completed their degree at any other institution. 100% of them report their experience at College Bound changed them and how they understood the world around them. So we really see that we're doing transformational work and doing it with students who really need a different type of college experience that's rigorous, built around engaged scholarship, but also built and connected around their lives very deeply.
Great, thank you both. Any questions for College Unbound? Chair Cottam.
Can you tell us what some of your graduates have done or planning to do? Do most of them have jobs and are continuing on? Has this afforded them promotions or opportunities?
Yes, I'll start, Adam, you could add, you're closer to it. But the last time, like a year ago, when we collected data, it was something like 76% had said they either moved to another job or moved up in their job. In this last survey that Adam was talking about, 74% said it made them more marketable. So we look for more than they just getting the bachelor's degree. Most of them talked about being transformed as an adult. But also it's kind of magical. People have worked in daycare for 15 years at one position. The day they get their bachelor's degree, they were given a higher job. Other people were made directors by getting their job. So that piece of paper, besides their own growth, has been very important. And that's one of our goals also. Adam, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I'll add a little bit, only because our alumni survey, we had 100% of our alumni participate in the survey. And it's even better than Dennis was bragging about it. It's 97% of our graduates say they are more marketable now with this degree. 90% of them, they drive change in their organization. 83% of them report they're doing more satisfying work since completing their degree. 17% of our alumni have been accepted into graduate school.
Yeah. And one of the nice things happened, we just got this award. It's called the RISE Award for the work with parents. Because if the parents get the degree, it raises the probability between 50 and 70% that their children will go to college and finish. So this national organization, OMADR, and Lumina gave us this prize. So we're very excited. We just begun. We're small, but I've been appreciating your support.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Duffy.
Yeah, is Bob Carruthers still involved with the organization?
Yes, Bob Carruthers is our vice president, our executive vice president, who's been working with us. He started on the board and then on our board and then switched to working with us. So he's part of the team of Adam, myself, and Congressman Wagon is a vice president, head of finances.
Well, that's a great depth of higher ed experience in Rhode Island.
Yeah, so we brought in the experienced stuff with the inexperienced guys.
Right. Any other questions for our guests? Thank you. Bishop Williams.
Sir. Great to see you, Mr. Litke and Mr. Bush.
Good to see you.
Just anecdotally, I just run into more and more of your graduates and adults who are in your programs. So your percentages are fantastic. It's hard to believe it's only been a few years because I'm running into more and more folks, including city government and other nonprofits as well, which is really encouraging to see. So thank you for your work and hope things continue to go well.
Thank you, Bishop. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bishop. Tammy, just again for process. So we had the discussion this evening. Now at our next full council meeting, we'll have an action item to approve these 2 items, 7A and 7B on our agenda tonight. Is that correct? Tammy, you're on mute. Come off mute, please.
Apologies. That's correct, Mr. Chairman. The 2 items were brought up to the council for review and discussion tonight, and they will be back on the agenda as action items in the October meeting.
Yeah. And if Adam, you could say a word about how all colleges are going for approval of distant learning during this time, to just give them a perspective, that would be great.
Sure. There were
Sorry, Tammy.
There's two discussion items, and the second one is about our notification of interest to be able to offer more than 50% of our degree for a student online through distance remote education. It mirrors an application that we filed to the New England Council of Higher Education as well, where in this COVID moment, they recognize that schools are doing more and more online. We feel strongly about our success in making sure that what's true and authentic about our program has been able to translate into an online environment. And in the uncertainty of COVID, and certainly knowing that our student body, our frontline workers are themselves immunocompromised, we want to make sure we have the avenues to recognize degree pathways where they might not be returning in person the same way.
Understood. Thank you very much for that. Oh, Senator Rizzo.
Yeah. The one observation I want to make is that we always struggle to keep our kids with a really good persistence rate. If we can get them even close to Dennis Lippy, we'd be doing just fine.
Thank you. We're trying. We just got to keep it once we get big. I know how hard it is once you get bigger, but that's what we're trying. So.
Great. Thank you both.
All
And
right.
we'll see you at our next meeting.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
That concludes our agenda items for this evening. I'll note the next time we will be together is next Tuesday, September 22nd, for a full Board of Education meeting. Again, next Tuesday, 9/22, 5:30 p.m., same modality as this evening, both hybrid in person. You should have received an inquiry today from Angela asking if you will be in person or on Zoom. If you have not responded, please do. If you didn't get that communication, please let Angela know if you could, whether you'll be in person or on Zoom next Tuesday, 9/22, for the hybrid meeting. And then we have a council meeting, I believe, October 14th. I'm going to call that tentative right now as our next, just as things have been so fluid. So we are tentatively next October 14th as a council, but next Tuesday, the 22nd, is a full Board of Education. That having been said, may I have a motion to adjourn made by Mr. Duffy, seconded by Ms. Green. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Be safe, everybody.